looking at the audience, and it is predominantly male, and I hope that in a few years to come that also would have changed, that the balance of contribution from leaders does include 50% of the world's population to also be present here, because, as we all know, diverse thoughts actually deliver better outcomes, and I think that I'm really pleased that whilst I'm here with world leaders, thought leaders, with top business people, with politicians, one of the things that comes to mind, the reason why I set up Powerful Women for information for you all, was that I think the power sector is one of the most interesting, exciting sectors that you can actually be part of. And when I was minister in the Energy and Climate Change Department in the UK, it was really interesting to see how innovative thought really does change the dynamics of how the consumer accesses power. There has been an amazing transformation on the Indian landscape since the markets were liberalised, and what I'd like to do over the next few minutes is to talk to you about how the electricity market reforms in the UK provided a transformation of access, choice and competition to the UK consumer. But before I start that, I'd like to give you my observations as an Indian-born British citizen of how over the last 4 decades of visiting India very frequently, I've also seen the landscape evolve and open up for better choice opportunities, and particularly for new business. In 2015, India launched their National Renewable Energy Act with the purpose of lowering CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gases. And as the Honourable Minister Prabhu said, it has to be very much about how does the future of the utility sector respond to the reduction of CO2 emissions, as well as becoming a greater, more efficient sector. The Act called for India to make changes for their use of fossil fuels and increase the use of renewables, which offered Indian citizens diverse alternatives of energy, while still providing enough power to all homes in India. Looking at the Act, I can see the overall benefit that this brings to a country the scale and size and population of India, because by increasing the renewable energy sector, houses can be powered on a range of alternative sources of electricity that do give families the benefit of being able to live in cleaner, greener environments. The Act has highlighted the needs of rural India. My belief predominantly this will be met, of course, through off-grid as well as on-grid solutions. Currently, there is a great need for on-grid transmission lines and infrastructure in India to be updated if it is to take that increased load of power. For many families, of course, electricity deficits or no electricity access, off-grid solutions offers them a real opportunity of portal into modern-day living. Being able to have the solutions to charge mobile phones, basic things for all of us. But if you think of rural India, it is quite a challenge even today to access mobile phones, computers, televisions, basic lighting. This will enable rural India to embrace modernity. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll talk briefly about the electricity markets in the UK. And the Honourable Minister talked about regulations in technology. In '89, when we privatised our markets there, we enabled our consumers a real provision of choice. And since then we've seen a number of pieces of legislation that, whilst there has been greater competition, what we did recognise was that we needed to also have a real strong independent regulator. In 2008 we introduced the Climate Change Act, and that brought into effect that the UK would commit itself to reducing its carbon emissions by 80% by 2050. And with our European partners, we've committed to having 20% of our electricity being generated by the renewable sources by 2020 compared to 1990. Even though privatisation was to transform the experience of competition for the consumer, which was noted, what we were noting was that large utility companies were purchasing and buying out the smaller ones. So we do need to make sure that competition stays very much part of the market. And we also recognise that 20% of our traditional fuel was going to come offline by 2020. So it was imperative of us to really look at how we could increase competition for the consumer in the UK. The 2013 Energy Act, which I took through the House of Lords, brought forward legislation that responded to certainty for investors, greater support for non-traditional fossil fuel, and generated an environment for increased competition at the same time as ensuring security of supply. And for those of you who have followed the reforms in the UK would know very much about the contracts for difference, the capacity markets, and the ability that has allowed for the renewable sector to come on par with traditional fossil fuels. And it's also helped pull through some of our more innovative technologies, and the Honourable Minister mentioned biomass, solar energy, wind energy, but again, there are some real interesting, exciting technologies. I've looked at anaerobic digesters for small holdings, and I think there is a wide range now of technologies that, once they come online, will push the prices of electricity down. Developers that applied for the contract for difference, once they had grid connection and planning agreements in place, were able to then commit to long-term investment certainty, knowing that they would have a return over a long period of time. The UK has a £120 million billion pound share of the global low-carbon goods and services market, which is equivalent to around 8% of our GDP. And that's a third of our recent growth in the UK, generating around 1 million jobs with low-carbon growth associated jobs as well. In a global market last year, that was valued to be around $4 trillion, but it also demonstrates that there is great capacity by maintaining our competitive advantage. We need to stay ahead of the curve on our technologies. Having a strong regulator and reforming the number of tariffs available enabled our consumers to be more informed about the choices that they make, and it is the increase in competition that allows the consumer to shop around for the best possible deals that they can get. Alongside the reforms of the UK market, we've also seen the largest rollout of smart meters, and which was something that we want to roll out to every household and small business in the UK by 2019. And that's where my relationship with Babel goes. We have been fellow travellers on this journey of the smart meter rollout. And the smart meter programme is, in my view, the precursor to smart grids, to smart cities, to smart living. It is exciting to know that Prime Minister Modi has an ambition for 100 smart cities in India, and the utility sector has got to be at the heart of these smart cities. India is one of the largest emissions emitters currently, and we know that around 280 million people still live without electricity. 1 in 4 have intermittent and irregular supplies. So it makes them dependent on unclean, unsafe alternatives. But affordability has to be at the heart of what the consumer will want if they are going to turn away from those dirty energies to a much cleaner, more effective, efficient alternative source. And with 275 million people living on less than $1.25 a day, the utility sector, again, has a real place to play in ensuring that access and choice is there. Energy has to be affordable, even to those on the smallest incomes. People aren't willing to change if they can't afford to change. And that's something we're all aware of in the UK. Emission reduction, efficiency and affordability have to go hand in hand. So the gathering of businesses here today from across the utility world enables us all to have an opportunity. And I think the Honourable Minister summed it up rather cleverly in that best practice sharing, bringing together the minds of people interested in the sector, experts in the sector, really does offer intelligent on-grid, off-grid solutions. And he's absolutely right to say that there will be solutions that will be completely impossible to reach those that are in rural off-grid areas, and therefore it is important that the off-grid solutions are as equally viable as on-grid. What is certain is that the market is expanding, and as consumers globally demand to be assured of secure electricity, we have all got a role to play in shaping how that transformation looks like. Interestingly enough, COP21 in Paris last year saw a global agreement, which we all agreed on, was that we had to do more for the reduction of emissions, and we had to do more to see cleaner, greener energy generation. But we also need a skilled workforce that is able to deliver that new technology, and I think that's also a really interesting, exciting area of innovation for us all. And it's time that we reached out and connected those that have never had access to energy and those that have intermittent energy. And for that, the utility sector has to work together to find those solutions. Yesterday I was at the exhibition. I looked around at some really interesting offers, and today I'll be talking to young people at the exhibition because, amazingly, they have got these wonderful ideas that, if they are turned into reality, will completely transform the utility sector. So I wish you all a very, very good conference, and I'm really pleased to be here, and I was delighted to be invited. It is an area that I'm completely passionate about, but I do think that it is one that the utility sectors have to step up, because they will help shape future cities. Thank you very much indeed.